Hello everyone and welcome back to Ash and a Brother. This is not my idea. It was requested by someone else who we will get into in the next part of this video. But before we begin, I'd just like to say that I originally told this guy this would be my 400 sub special, but that is taking way too long and I don't want to keep this guy waiting for like months because that's just rude. So I'm just gonna get the story done right now. Get the first part done right now. So this is the guy who came up with the idea and pitched it to the channel in the comment sections of one of my what if videos. I'd like to thank this guy called NGC. Yeah, I'd like to thank them. They really helped me come up with this video. I hope he likes it, he or she, I don't know, and I hope the viewers who see this video like it, because it took me a long time to get the idea right. I had all these wacky ideas, but I finally settled with one concrete idea and went ahead with it. Anyway, let me just get into the story. So, we start off with Ash, like normal, looking at the TV screen, excited, and looking at the battle between two mysterious trainers on TV as Ash was enjoying it. And his brother, who I'm going to call Jack, would walk in, and he would then say, "Ash, tomorrow we start as trainers. We can't be late. Professor Oak might not give us a Pokemon." As Ash would say, okay, Jack. Let me just finish watching this epic battle. As then, Delia would then walk into the room like normal and tell her two sons that they should go to bed and get ready for tomorrow, their big day. And I'd just like to explain my reasoning on why Jack is called Jack, because in the Pokemon Yellow games, like Red, yeah, you can either call him Yellow, Ash, or Jack, even though you all know he's Red, yeah. Let's just ignore the Yellow name and the two options here, since Pokemon Yellow is like the closest official game to the anime, is it's based off the original series. Yeah, like we obviously have the name of our protagonist, Ash, on the second set option for name, and the last option is Jack. So I decided to call Ash's twin brother Jack. Yes, so yeah, because it was one of the name options in Pokemon Yellow, which is like the closest official game to the anime. Yeah, so like I said earlier, Jack would make sure that him and Ash would sleep early, same with Delia. And I'd just like to say that the difference between Jack and Ash is that Ash was the one who had all the willpower and the grit, like the one who would keep going for a long time, have much more resilience. Like how we see in the anime, how he lost all of these Pokemon leagues, but he eventually won the Alola League. He had that kind of determination, and Jack was the organized one, the one who actually had like the organization and strategic mindset to actually get the winning done and show up on time and get things done. But he didn't have the same willpower that Ash had, and Ash didn't have the organization or strategic nature of Jack. And you'll see later in the story how these two will eventually help each other with their individual qualities. And the two twins would set out on the way to Professor Oak's lab, but Ash would feel drawn to Route 1 as he'd feel something strange going on there. As he feel like he had to go check out what was going on and then go to the lab, as he felt like something was going on. So he'd tell his brother Jack that he was going to go and check out something, as he felt like there was something going on at Route 1. As Ash is naturally a curious person, Jack would tell his brother to go, but don't be too long at the lab, because he doesn't want Ash to get late and not get a single Pokemon. So Ash will go and check out Route 1 to see what the problem was, but he would see an egg that Sunshine enveloped, like in Alola, like when Ash first met Nebby/Cosmog. It was like enveloped in the sunshine, like Ash was supposed to meet Nebby and all that stuff, you know. So that would be the same thing with this egg. Ash would walk into Route 1 where he would see the egg, and he would feel like he was supposed to interact with the egg, and he would decide to walk towards it. But the moment he got close, it would begin to glow. As we'd flash all the way to Jack in Professor Oak's lab, as he would find a man with Charmander and Bulbasaur. Jack would think what happened to Squirtle, knowing that Ash really wanted Squirtle as a starter Pokemon. Yes, but he would decide that Ash was just going to get the Charmander, as he already made up his mind that he wanted Bulbasaur. As for the strategic mindset, he knew that Bulbasaur would be the best overall for the gyms in Kanto, as he knew that Pewter City was a rock-type gym and Cerulean was a water-type gym, and Vermilion was an electric-type gym which grass resists, and also the fourth gym is a grass-type gym. He knew overall that Bulbasaur that was the easiest option to choose for Kanto, because it had type advantages over all the gyms, and he thought that the entire concept of a lizard and a flower being one was kind of a cool thing. So he would choose Bulbasaur as his starter. Jack would begin waiting for Ash's den before he would go and receive his Pokeballs and Pokedex. Yeah, he wanted to wait for Ash, and then they could do it together as brothers, as twins. But a boy would come running through like he was on a marathon, as he would dash right past Jack, as he would then run towards Professor Oak and say, "Professor, I biked all the way here from Pewter City. I'm here to receive my starter Pokemon." As then he would look at the Charmander that would look at him, excited to be with him. As then he would quickly choose the Charmander, grab the Pokeballs and Pokedex out of Oak's hand, and just leave, as he'd dash out of the lab. Jack would be devastated for his brother, as he thought that Ash was never going to get a start Pokemon, and that Ash was going to have to start again the next year, and that Ash was making a foolish mistake doing whatever he was doing at Route 1, checking out whatever was going on, as Ash should have just minded his own business. As Jack would then walk towards Professor Oak and tell him that it and would ask Professor Oak if he has any reserve Pokemon because his brother might need it. And he would also ask for the Pokedex, which Professor Oak would give him, and ask for his 6 Pokeballs. As we'd flash to Ash, as the egg would hatch into a Growlithe. The Growlithe would immediately look at Ash and would think that Ash was like its father or mother, as when Ash decided to leave the Route 1 to see if he could get his starter Pokemon, the Growlithe would follow him. As when Ash made it into the lab, the Growlithe was right behind him. As then Professor Oak would notice this, as then Jack would turn and see his brother, but Professor Oak would be interested in the Growlithe, as he would walk towards the Growlithe and examine it to see why it was in the lab and see if it was following Ash. As then he'd quickly be able to analyze that this Growlithe was a baby and that it had thought Ash was its mother and wanted to be with him and hang around him. So Professor Oak would say that he thought that Ash was not going to get a starter because he was late, as he would ask Ash what he was doing in Route 1. Ash would explain that he kind of felt drawn to Growlithe's egg, so he wanted to go and see what was going on, and of course he met Growlithe as an egg, and then Growlithe hatched the moment he interacted with Growlithe. So yeah, Professor Oak would then say, wow, almost like fate had drawn you two together. Anyway, that's probably just a silly thought, it's probably just luck. As then Ash and Jack would decide to have a little conversation of their own, and so Jack would say, Ash, you could, if it wasn't Growlithe at Route 1, you might have never gotten the starter Pokemon. How it was reckless of you. Should have probably just came straight to the lab and got your starter. And Ash would apologize and say that he just wanted to go and see what was going on. As he would also tell his brother that Jack knows how curious he is. As then Professor Oak would decide to give Ash a Pokeball to catch Growlithe, as he knew that Growlithe obviously wanted to be with Ash in one way or another. And Professor Oak knew that the only way that Growlithe was going to be with Ash was if it was his Pokemon. So Ash would then walk towards Growlithe and ask it if it wants to be his Pokemon and travel with him. And Growlithe would obviously say yes, as it thought Ash to be part of its family, and it would immediately jump onto the Pokeball, as it would be absorbed into the Pokeball and it would become Ash's starter Pokemon. So Professor Oak would give Ash 6 Pokeballs and the Pokedex, and would then say that him and Jack should go and catch as much Pokemon as they can and see if they can complete the Pokedex, or at least complete it to a decent degree. Instead, he'd wish them farewell. The 2 brothers would leave and go to Route 1, where Ash had found Growlithe, but this time they were looking to add some new Pokemon to their arsenals, as they would encounter a Bellsprout. As Ash would decide to battle it with Growlithe would hit it with an Ember, which would instantly almost knock it out. Ash would then throw a Pokeball and catch it quickly. As they continued their adventure and they'd encounter a Mankey, and Ash would decide that he didn't want to catch the Mankey as he just caught a Pokemon already on the route, and Jack would use Bulbasaur against the Mankey. Bulbasaur would use a Razor Leaf on the Mankeys, and the Mankey would use a Mega Kick on Bulbasaur, and then Bulbasaur would wrap its Vine-Whips around the Mankey and squeeze it for a little bit, which would then leave the Mankey exhausted, as Jack would then catch it. So they'd eventually traverse into Viridian City, and they would heal the Pokemon and make their way into Viridian Forest. They'd walk through Viridian Forest until they meet a samurai who said that he was challenged by a very impatient trainer with a Charmander on a bicycle, and a cocky kid who looked like Professor Oak with a Squirtle, and they were all from Pallet Town. They wanted to battle a few more trainers from Pallet Town, and he'd ask Ash and Jack if they're from Pallet Town, as then they'd both say yes and say that they are twins. As then Samurai would say that as much as he wanted to battle both of them, only one would manage to, as Ash and Jack would decide that there was only one way to settle this: rock, paper, scissors, as they'd have one round, and Ash would win from sheer luck, as he would pick rock and Jack would pick scissors, so Ash would win and have the battle against Samurai. He would use Bellsprout against Samurai's Metapod, as he would use the wrap move on Metapod, which would squeeze Metapod, but Metapod would then use Harden a bunch of times, but eventually Ash would use Razor Leaf on the hardened Metapod, and it would then reinforce the wrap, which would hurt Metapod a lot, and eventually, as much as Metapod hardened, Bellsprout would use a Razor Leaf, which would eventually defeat Metapod, as Samurai would eventually send out his Pinsir. Ash would then go for the same wrap strategy, but Pinsir would break through the vines easy, as then he would use a Brick Break on Bellsprout, which would knock down Bellsprout. Bellsprout would then use a Vine Whip, which would actually kind of squeeze Pinsir, and it would kind of knock Pinsir about, but Pinsir would eventually break out, but Bellsprout would respond with a bunch of Razor Leaves, which would actually land a critical hit on Pinsir, and Pinsir would then crush Bellsprout with its horns, as would eventually knock out Bellsprout, as Ash would then send out his Growlithe, his Tartar Pokemon. Growlithe would use an Ember on Pinsir, and Growlithe would actually learn a new move, which would be Flame Roll, which would instantly knock out Pinsir, as Samurai would then say that all these pilot trainers really were strong, and he would ask Ash why he didn't have a Bulbasaur, and Ash would say that Jack has a Bulbasaur, and that he didn't get a traditional Kanto's Tartar. As then the twins would traverse through Viridian City, and because Jack didn't get to battle the Samurai, with his strategic thinking, he would decide to make up for the experience by training with his brother using both of their Pokemon. And also he would say that in order for the Pewter City battle, they both need to be prepared, as Brock is a strong gym leader from what he's heard and from what he's read from the magazines and newspapers, about how Pokemon trainers have gone to Brock and he's beaten them so badly that they've quit. So Ash would use Growlithe against Mankey, and Jack would use Mankey against Growlithe, and Ash would use Bellsprout against Bulbasaur, and Jack would use Bulbasaur against Bellsprout. They would use the grass types against each other, and they would also use this PD offensive Pokemon against each other, as Flame Wheel and Mega Kick would clash, as Vine Whip would wrestle, as both Pokemon would clash for a long time, but eventually they cancel each other out. All four would cancel each other out, and Ash would use its divines on Bellsprout would use Slam to squash Bulbasaur, as Bulbasaur would then use Razor Leaf, and Growlithe would clash with Bite, and Mankey would clash with Karate Chop, as eventually both Pokemon would do even damage to each other. And as Growlithe used Ember, Mankey would surprise everyone with a new move, which would actually be Vacuum Wave. And before anyone says that Mankey doesn't learn that, in the Gen 4 games where Vacuum Wave was introduced as a move, they could learn it by tutoring. And there are a lot of times in the anime where Pokemon have learnt moves that they don't really learn by leveling up, really. So I'm just going to say that Mankey learns Vacuum Wave, which will counter Ember, as the two grass types use Razor Leaf on each other, and both moves will cancel out, as Jack and Ash have both decided this was adequate training for Pewter City, as it actually taken hours, as all four Pokemon were evenly matched. As they then leave Iridian City and rush to the Pokemon Center and then the gym, they won't even meet Flint on the way, as they rushed right past him. As they make it into the Pewter Gym, and because Ash had battled Samurai last, would decide that Jack was gonna go and battle Brock first. And Jack also was really excited to test his two Pokemon on Brock, as both of his Pokemon had type advantages on rock types, unlike Ash, where only one had type advantages. So both trainers would start off with Mankey and Geodude respectively. Mankey would use Vacuum Wave on Geodude, which would do a lot of super effective damage, as Geodude would then use a Magnitude 7 to do a decent chunk of damage to Mankey. Mankey would then use a Karate Chop to knock out Geodude, as Brock would then send out his Onix, who would tank a Vacuum Wave but would take a decent chunk of damage, as Onix would then respond with an Earthquake, which would knock back Mankey for a lot of damage. Mankey would then respond with a Karate Chop, which would knock down Onix, as Onix would then call for a Rock Slide, which would knock out Mankey. Jack would then send out his Bulbasaur, who would use a Razor Leaf, which would instantly knock out Onix because of the quad effective super effective move, and because of Mankey's super effective blows with Vacuum Wave and Karate Chop. This would also cause Bulbasaur to evolve from the experience it gained, as your ground size and its flower would grow as it evolved into Ivysaur. Brock would then award Jack with his first Pokemon badge, as he would thank the gym leader. And now you can see on the slide that I've added like sections and columns and like sentences to describe like which badges and Pokemon belong to which trainers, just in case anyone gets confused. So yeah. And now the next day, Ash would battle Brock, as he would use Bellsprout against Brock's Geodude. Bellsprout would use Razor Leaf, which would instantly knock out Geodude, as Brock would then send out his Onix against Bellsprout, as Bellsprout would then use its Vine Whip on Onix and wrap itself around Onix for super effective damage and knock it around, which would actually do a decent chunk of damage to Onix. Onix would then respond with an Earthquake, which would knock back Bellsprout for a lot of damage, as Bellsprout would then be hit by a Rock Slide. Ash would then send out his Growlithe, his Tart Pokemon, and Brock would say that looks like Ash is probably going to lose here, as he should have caught a water type Pokemon or fighting type like his twin brother to help him in this battle, as Growlithe has a type advantage against both types of Onix, which are rock and ground. But Ash would say that Pokemon battles aren't just about type advantages, it's about if you're a good trainer, if you can utilize your Pokemon's moves in the best way possible. As Ash would turn off idiot mode and go full strategic mode, as he would then use a flame wheel on Onix, as Onix would then use rock slide, and Growlithe would climb over the rocks, as Growlithe would propel itself from the rocks and use a flame wheel on Onix, which would actually knock out Onix, as the force from the height of the rocks down onto Onix did a lot of damage, as the air time that Growlithe gained from climbing up the rocks increased the power of Flame Wheel, and this would actually show flashes of the trainer that Ash would become in the future, like in Journeys, the amazing trainer who's in the Masters 8 and was able to defeat a mega shiny Metagross with a Pikachu using Iron Tail. Yeah, so Onix would be knocked out and Growlithe would stand back into position, proud and happy with its trainer, as at this point it had figured out that Ash wasn't its mom or dad, but it still loved him the same way it did before, as it was actually there for it, unlike its parents. So Brock would then walk towards Ash and would give him his gym badge and say that him and his brother are both really strong and have a lot of potential, and that if he could, he would like to travel with them and see how they advance as trainers. So when Brock went to go and congratulate the brothers and say goodbye to them and wish them well, Flint would walk right next to his son and the two twins, and he would then say, "Hello, son," as he would grab Brock's attention, as he would then say, "I'd like to apologize for all of the things I've done terrible things," but before he could finish his sentence, Brock would say, "What are you doing here? You just left us here, and you expect a simple apology will just fix everything?" Then Flint would say, "Son, let me finish my speech. I made a mistake by running away and trying to be a Pokemon trainer. I failed terribly at that, and I failed terribly by raising you a little bit and then running away the moment your mom just went and did her own things. I made a mistake, and it was stupid." As then Flint would continue his apology by saying, "Now I'm here. I have manned up and decided to take care of my massive family. I made a massive mistake by trying to run away after screwing you and your siblings over by leaving you to raise them, because I failed to become a successful Pokemon trainer, and because your mom wasn't available." Then Brock's heart would begin to soften, as he'd understand that Flint had just made a mistake and that now he was actually here to fix it, unlike some people. And Brock would then say, "Okay, even though that wasn't the best apology, I could actually feel that you were sorry and actually wanted to do something. So you have to do this and do that." He would go on to give Flint a full routine on how to look after his siblings And Flint would then understand and pull out a notebook and write everything down. As they'd say, okay, I understand, son. And now, go follow your dreams. As then he would say goodbye to all three trainers. As then they'd leave through to the next route. As on their way to Mount Moon, they'd encounter a shiny Spearow, and Jack would immediately send out Mankey as he wanted the shiny Spearow, as would use Mega Kick on the Spearow, and Spearow would respond with an aerial ace, but Mankey would tank it and respond with a vacuum wave, which would knock it down, as Jack would quickly add the shiny Spearow to his collection. As Brock and Ash were kind of jealous, as they also wanted this shiny Spearow, as it's just shiny, it's rare. But the moment they stepped into Mount Moon and saw two Zubat, they'd immediately throw a Pokeball, which would catch the Zubat, which would add Zubat to Brock's team and Ash's team. So, and the stuff in Mount Moon would go the same, nothing would really change, so I'm not going to cover it. So, now it's time to talk about the real changes that would happen in this What If. So, because Ash never found Misty and began travelling with her, she would instead just hang around Route 1 and then just train her Pokemon and then go back to Cerulean and prove to her sisters that she's better than them and try become the gym leader and join their swimming group. So she would be having an argument about who's the best out of all the sensational sisters, them three or her. As then she'd say that she's better than them and should be the gym leader and should be in the swimming crew thing. As she was having an argument, angry, complaining about how they kind of alienated her from their group, even though she was their own blood and just there going out on them. As then in their defense, Misty wasn't as good looking as them. This would immediately cause Misty to fire up and say, at least she's a good enough trainer to leave this Cerulean city and train and become strong, and that she's stronger than them. They just had a battle and Staryu wiped all of them clean. The three sensational sisters would keep quiet, as unlike in the sponsoring What If, when no one's wanted Ash, Misty had actually trained her Staryu and her Starmie, so they were actually kind of stronger. So they actually just wiped the sensational sisters' Pokemon even when they weren't weakened. So Misty would turn and would say, and would greet all three of them, Ash, Jack and Brock, who were kind of annoyed that they were just there having an argument about something that isn't really too relevant to them. So Ash would then say, finally, we're going to talk about a gym battle. As Jack would then say, all that girl drama was getting boring. As then Misty would say, hey you, I could just kick all of you three out and then you can just start all over again, or you can just go and battle other gyms and you don't come here ever again. You better show me some respect. As then Ash would then say, what is there to respect about someone our age arguing about something as trivial as beauty and sibling rivalries? As then Misty would say, what's your tone, kids? I'll kick all of you out. You say one more negative word about me or my family. As then Brock would say, I'm a gym leader here too, and no offense, but I think you should actually be doing your job alright. Misty would actually shut up by this, as someone who was in the same boat as her was actually talking about it, even though she wasn't really an official gym leader. It was her three sisters, but they were kind of like all beaten by her, so they weren't really in any position to be battling anybody. So Misty would then say, okay, you two, who's gonna battle me first? Because Jack had the gym battle first, Ash was going to use Bellsprout against Tommy, as Jack advised him that Bellsprout had the type advantage. Bellsprout used Razor Leaf on Tommy to do a lot of damage, as Tommy then responded with Side Beam, which would do a lot of damage to Bellsprout. Bellsprout would then whack Tommy with a Vine Whip, as Tommy would then use an Ice Beam, which would freeze Bellsprout. As Tommy would then, Misty would then say, oh my god, that was the shortest battle of my life, man. Even my three sisters, who are more interested in the swimming industry, are stronger than you. You're such a joke. You were there with all the big talk and no action. As then, she would start to walk away with Tommy, thinking that the battle was over, as she wanted the battle to be a one-on-one. But then, she would hear the ice breaking, as then she turned, as the ice would begin to glow green, the color of nature. As then Bellsprout was evolving, and Ash would smirk, saying that it was time for the real battle to begin. As the ice would break and Weeping Bell had emerged, Weeping Bell would quickly hit Staryu with Razor Leaf, which would do a lot of damage, as then it would instantly finish off Starmie with an energy ball. Misty was so shocked about her quick defeat, but she would then walk towards Ash and say, wow, you really were justified about what you said about me earlier. Anyway, you're a good trainer. Well done. Then, the next day, she would have a battle with Jack, and Jack would use Ivysaur against her Starmie, and Ivysaur would use Razor Leaf on Starmie, which would knock it back for considerable amount of damage, as Starmie would then use an Ice Beam, which would be avoided by Ivysaur, but would cause a massive mini tower of ice to form, as Ivysaur would stand on the block of ice, and it would whip Starmie with Divine Whips for a lot of damage, but Starmie would eventually respond with a Side Beam, which would hurt Ivysaur for a lot of damage, as Ivysaur would be blasted around with Psychic, as it would begin to be hurt by Starmie's Psychic. Ivysaur was being hurt by the Psychic, but eventually its Overgrow would awaken, as it would stand up, blasting the Psychic energy away, and it would launch a Razor Leaf, which would do a lot of damage, which would knock Starmie over, as it would then beat Starmie up with all the whips, as it would whip Starmie, and it would beat it with like bam 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 bam, as eventually Starmie would be so beaten up it would be fainted, as the Overgrow calming down would cause all the ice to break, as then it would show how strong Ivysaur really was, as Jack would return Ivysaur and Misty would congratulate him and say how strong he really was.